Facts don't care about your feelings. Facts don't care about your feelings. These are facts.
So this article is from May 16th. I haven't touched on it yet, however. The headline, this is from CNN.com, by the way. The headline, Biden approves plan to redeploy U.S. troops to Somalia. And then let me read from the body of the text. Quote, President Joe Biden has approved a request by the Pentagon to redeploy U.S. troops to Somalia in an effort to counter the terrorist group al-Shabaab. The move reverses a decision by Donald Trump to withdraw all troops from the country in 2020. The U.S. will reposition U.S. forces in East Africa and move to restore a U.S. military presence in Somalia in consultation with the Somali government, the official told reporters on Monday. The official said under 500 troops will be sent back into the country, but declined to provide a precise number. He emphasized, however, that the Pentagon, quote, will not be restoring the full contingent of operators present in Somalia before the previous administration's withdrawal, which was about 750 military personnel. So there's a couple things. This decision generated a lot of discourse. So on the one hand, you have the Jimmy Dore types.
The CIA talking points later.
Who are kind of like, if you're not online, like Jimmy Dore is a pundit and his angle has historically been primarily attacking the leftmost members of Congress, which is to say, I mean, they're still center-left. I would consider Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez center-left in the grand scheme of things. She's left-wing in the U.S., but basically criticizing them from a left perspective and saving his biggest criticism for them specifically. Like, he has always criticized them more than, say, Republicans. And personally, if you're doing that from the left, I don't really care. But the problem is, what Jimmy Dore realized is that the more he courts the right with that angle, the more money he gets. And I think this is the path that a lot of people go down. Like, you have people like Tim Pool, who, in my mind, is very right-wing, but he presents himself very well as a type of liberal centrist, because what he does is he always emphasizes the liberal positions he believes in, but he also is surrounded by people who are conventional, just right-wing dopes, or right-wing people who are even more like right-wing than your average Republican, I guess. And he always talks about stories that are bait for them. And so I think what Tim Pool realized is, assuming he actually genuinely is a center-left liberal, I think he's actually a lot more right-wing, and he knows he's actually a lot more right-wing than he says. Tim Pool knows that if his show is for right-wingers, he can still talk as much as he wants about how he's a center-left liberal while getting all of the audience from the right wing. Anyway, Jimmy Dore kind of made a similar maneuver, although his angle has always been, I'm criticizing the leftmost members of Congress because they aren't left enough. And then he started adding in, well, also, like, I'm anti-vax, so, or anti-vax mandates. And he's been moving further and further right from that starting point. And the reason I'm establishing all this is that decision for the U.S. to intervene in Somalia, it caused Jimmy Dore and some people like him to be like, oh crap, oh wait, maybe I'm going to support the Republicans. They're way less of the warmongering party now. And of course, that's really silly, because it's like, Jimmy Dore never wanted to do the lesser of two evil voting and vote for Democrats, which I applaud. I'm not an advocate for people voting for Democrats in practice. But now he's essentially gone full circle where he's basically saying, like, well, it's actually the lesser of two evils to vote Republican, which is just bizarre because, I mean, yeah, they have more people on the Republican side who explicitly are just like, no war, we're anti-war, keep America out of wars, but their reasoning is completely different, and they honestly, genuinely don't actually mean that. I mean, sure, there's probably some super principled libertarian-like Republicans, but most of them are not like that. So I'm getting deeper though. So you had the Jimmy Dore and Jimmy Dore types who were saying, like, well, now we gotta go for the Republicans for damage reduction. They're not warmongering like the Democrats, which then led to this discourse where the type of social democrats who are ostensibly for left-wing social programs, but just basically gulp up whatever the CIA or the U.S. State Department put on their plate. You know, they're like, we're anarcho-NATO, we're pro-NATO, anarcho-democratists. Those type of losers that you see online sometimes. They are now basically being like, this is not an invasion. Don't make this seem like an invasion of Somalia. The president wanted them to come in. It's only 500 people. Blah, blah, blah. All of that kind of stuff. And to call it an invasion, yeah, that's maybe not accurate. Like, this is not on the level of the invasion of Iraq or anything. It's still a big deal, but it's just not. And the whole argument that, well, the president invited the U.S. troops there. Like, it's a lot more complicated than just saying that. And just saying that makes you seem like you kind of don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. So let me explain what I mean by that.
Every war fought starts with a false flag operation.
The current president of Somalia is a man named Hassan Sheikh Mohammed. He was also president of Somalia from 2012 to 2017. He became president on May 15th. Now, if you remember, this article I was reading from came out May 16th, which basically means this guy's first order of office before they even counted the last ballot was basically being like, yeah, we want U.S. troops to come back here. So this idea that the Somalian president invited them, there was obviously something more coordinated like this. It's not just what it seems on the surface. Like, they were basically holding out for this guy to get more power, and if you're more conspiratorial, then the U.S. influenced the election so that he would win. I mean, that's not too shocking to believe. The U.S. tries to influence a lot of elections all the time, and they usually can influence the elections in a place like Somalia, where the government structure is not very powerful. It's kind of struggling to retain the power it has. I mean, it's easier to influence an election that way. Like, it's not like the US where there's trillion-dollar industries built around elections and all of this kind of stuff. Like, it's harder to influence. But there's also another thing I want to draw attention. So these U.S. soldiers are going there to fight al-Shabaab, which it is a terrorist organization I have talked about on the show before. It's a offshoot of Al-Qaeda, or maybe not an offshoot, it's at least ostensibly a branch of Al-Qaeda based in East Africa. They're active in Somalia, Mozambique, I think Kenya as well, but maybe like the coast of Kenya and not as much. Because Kenya is kind of in between Somalia and Mozambique. Oh, and then Tanzania is also between Somalia and Mozambique, and they are active there. So, I mean, I'm not great with African geography, but they're up and down the east coast of Africa. Let's leave it at that. And so this president, Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, when he was in power before, this is just from Wikipedia. So this is, I mean, I had heard about this before, but I'm just reading it from Wikipedia because they summarize it well. Quote, the UN monitoring group has obtained evidence implicating Musa Haji Mohammed Ganjab, who acted as an advisor to the president Hassan Sheikh Mohammed and who is a member of his Abdul Wasil subclan, in the leakage of weaponry to al-Shabaab and other forces beyond the army. In other words, this would basically be like if in the U.S. an advisor to the president was distributing arms meant for the military to right-wing, like, white supremacist groups. That is basically the equivalent of this. And now the U.S. is going there to, quote-unquote, fight al-Shabaab literally the day after the guy who was arming them took office. Now that really smells funny to me, and I think this might be one of those things where, ISIS, a lot of people believe ISIS, especially in Syria, and this is backed up by evidence. I talked a couple episodes back about the Operation Timber Sycamore, which armed ISIS during the Syrian civil war. And then the U.S. kind of had to go in and do cleanup of ISIS when they realized that they were not going to coup the Syrian government. It kind of feels similar where, like, al-Shabaab was created to advance the goals of the U.S. and their proxies in East Africa, and it ended up getting out of hand. I don't know if it was ever intended for al-Shabaab to have the reach that they do, like all the way down to like Djibouti and Kenya and all these other places. And I think the U.S. government is basically like, we got to get a handle on these guys because they are not advancing our interests anymore. They were, and they were failing, and now they're after our asses. That's really what it kind of feels like.